Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our breeding webinar this evening. So my name is Michael Fitzgerald. Some of you will know me here working at the Teagasc office here in Kilkenny. So our webinar this evening, our speakers, after myself, we have Nigel Kennington also working from Kilkenny here. We'll be dealing with the use of the ICBF sire advice, and that's one of the important tools that we can use on the computer for breeding purposes. So that's to demonstrate how that is used. Then George Ramsbottom, who will be familiar to you all, will deal with a few issues, including synchronization of heifers and updates on the use of the sex semen. We'll also have a bit of time on the dairy beef index and the role that it has to play. And then we'll have a few questions at the end. So we hope to run it for about 3/4 of an hour is the aim. And just any of you have any questions, to make sure and use the chat button or the question and answer button on the bottom of your screens there to send in any questions, and we'll deal with them as we go on. So just to start off, I'll just go through a couple of slides that I have here myself, just to get you into the topic. So one of the questions that's often asked is the role of EBI. Does EBI work, or what's its role to play? So just to have a few summary here, which shows how EBI is delivering on the ground. So if we take the number under a number of indicators there, that go from the top, the bottom 20% of EBI up to the top, and then the average on the right hand side. So the overall average EBI is about 118 for the country, ranging from 61 in the bottom 20% up to 165 in the top 20%. And then we have an increasing number of people who are milk recording associated with increased with their higher EBI figures, and most very importantly, the milk liters per cow. So those with no EBI, 4,700. Bottom 20%, 5,364, up to 5,648 for the top 20%. And then our solids and butter, fat, and protein, when we look at those and combine them into the kilos of milk solids per cow, we get an average figure of 423 kilos. And for the top 20%, that's 466 kilos. So 410 at the bottom 20%, up to 466 for the top 20%. So if we take the top 20% compared with the average figure, we get about an extra 43 kilos of milk solids. And going on the price that was prevailing last year at about €5 per kilo of milk solid, that works out at over €200 per cow of a difference in terms of output, ranging from the top to the average. We also have an upward trend in terms of calving interval, or an improved figures in terms of calving interval. So 407 days for the bottom 20%, down to 374 for the top 20%, and the 6-week calving rate ranging from 56% up to 79% in the top. So and on the very bottom, then we have a figure here on the kilograms of carbon dioxide for kilograms produced, and again we have an improved. So from an environmental point of view, we have improved figures from those with the higher EBI compared to those with the lower EBI. So it's very important that we recognize that improved EBI from an environmental point of view is contributing as well. So just bearing in mind, that's the sort of where genetic gain, if you chase genetic gain, that's the sort of progress that you can see is being captured on the ground. And if we look at the same figure here, if we just take it in the Glanbia region, all of you might be familiar with the milk performance reports that you get. So if we take the average in the Glanbia region, EBI of 126, which is very close to the national average, of the top 20% at 167. So the difference in kilos of milk solids there is from 431 to 525. So again, based on our €5 per kilo of milk solid, that works out at €470 per cow. So a massive difference there once you get up into the top 10% compared to the average. And again, associated with that, the 6-week calving figures increasing from 70% to 88% for the top 10. So this is what EBI does. It drives increased milk production, and and a lot of that is associated with increased fertility. So these are the sort of figures that we're going to look at when we go through the sire advice program, and we're picking sires to match with your herd. So again, just to highlight the breeding criteria that you might use when you're selecting sires for the next while. So the overall EBI, we'll be saying at least 200, and 200 is very much a bottom figure there. We'd be certainly aiming for higher than that, but you shouldn't entertain bulls that are at under 200. And on the team of bulls you're going to pick, looking for an average of about 270. So there'll be plenty of bulls there that'll be over the 300 mark. Fertility, we want at least 80. Milk, we want at least 50. And the team averages there of 220 and 80 for those two sub-indexes. They're the two important sub-indexes that we're going to look at. For health, we definitely want to see a positive figure for health. So anything above 0 and a team average of 5 there. Beef, probably increased awareness there of the value of the calves. I mean, it'll be noticeable this spring. I think that people are conscious of the value of Frisian bull calves. If you want to maintain a reasonable standard of calf for beef purposes, looking for a beef sub-index of somewhere from -8 to -14, somewhere in that range, not let it slip too much below the -14 figure. And another figure that you should be aware of is the maintenance figure. Typically in the Danbia region, we would see that a lot of cows have a typical figure of about €12 there for the maintenance sub-index. So for Holstein Friesian cows, this equates to live weight of about 580 kilos. And that's based on the base figure of 640 kilos for a mature cow, which has a maintenance figure of 0. So for every 5 kilos that we drop, we take one unit of a maintenance sub-index, so €60 off the 640, because we get a 580 kilo cow, and that's probably what you'd like to maintain when you're picking your cows, when you're picking your sires. So you're probably going to avoid the ones with a maintenance figure up around 0 or minus, and avoid, if you're depending on if you want to chase Jersey crosses or crossbreeding, you're going to look at, they'll have a much lower or much more positive maintenance figure of somewhere maybe in 20 plus or so. So you can decide on the basis of the sire there what way you want to pitch your cow size going forward. So that all these will become evident there when Nigel starts to use his breeding criteria, or starts to use the sire advice. So I think at this stage I'll hand over to Nigel, who's going to take you through the sire advice program.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Michael. So firstly, I suppose, welcome everybody and thanks for joining in to tonight's webinar. So my name is Nigel Kennington, as Michael said, and I'm based in the Teagasc office in Kilkenny as well. So I'm just going to give you a quick whistle-stop tour of the sire advice program that's run by ICBF as a tool to help you make your breeding decisions for the forthcoming breeding season. So look, if we just started at Google, and I've Google searched ICBF login there, I'm just going to select the first option that comes up on the Google search, and it'll bring me to the ICBF home screen. So look, at just before we get into it, I suppose to use this sire advice program, Herd Plus, and if you are signed up with Herd Plus, you'll have your own username and password set up. So I'm just going to log in there now with my own username and password, and it'll bring me to a screen here now. So let me just see. So look, at just for the purpose of demonstration, we're going to use the Kildalton herd to run the sire advice program. Okay, so when you log in on your own accounts, you'll see a slightly different homepage. So instead of the options I have across here in the front or on the top of the screen in blue, you're going to have these options here. And look, at the one we're looking for tonight is applications, and then we're going to look for sire advice. So just again to summarize that, you'll be looking for applications across the top here in the blue banner. And when you get applications, you're looking for the drop down and sire advice. Okay, so that'll bring us to this page here. I suppose the first thing before we pick any bulls is we want to have an idea how many we're going to need to pick. And the minimum number of bulls that we'd like to have in a bull team, you'll see it here on the table in the bottom right hand corner, is 7 bulls minimum. And for larger herds, that goes up to 8, up to 14 for very large herds. So for tonight, the purpose of tonight, we're going to be looking at a herd maybe that we'd be looking at maybe 8 to 10 bulls being selected for that herd size. Okay, you do have the option to use the manual sire advice, where you perhaps have bulls already selected out in the catalogue and you just want to run an inbreeding check and a balanced breeding approach from that option. But for tonight, we're going to look at the Rolls Royce option, and we're going to click on Sire Advice Plus. So the green button there for start. And that'll hopefully bring us to the page then that displays all the eligible females available for breeding in our own herd. Okay, so what we have now is the list of all those eligible females for your own herd. We have their EBIs, and we can select now out animals perhaps for culling purposes. So if there's animals there with high cell count or lameness issues, or for any other reasons that we've decided we're not going to breed this animal for the coming season, we can select out that animal here. So if we were just to take this cow here, for example, and we're looking at the culling line down along here, and if we select that animal, we're going to say she's culled perhaps for a cell count issue, and we're going to go along and save that change down in the bottom right hand corner. Okay, so she will now be removed from selecting a bull for that cow. Similarly, I suppose there's going to be herds, and as we've gone out of the expansion phase in herds, there's perhaps more scope to use beef AI bulls within the dairy herd. So the goal of genetic gain, I suppose, is always to breed the best females in our herd to the best bulls out there. So to really maximize genetic gain, we want to breed the best with the best. So from that perspective, we can pick out animals maybe based on an EBI, maybe if they're low on EBI, or if they're poorly performing in terms of the milk recording results, or for maybe they're poor in protein or things like that. We have the option to select animals that will only be used for a beef AI straw. So there I've just selected 3 cows, for example, that can be bred to beef. I need to save changes down the bottom again, otherwise the information will be lost as I move on. And I have the option to sort through the cows along the top here, if you're really going to get into the nitty gritty of it. So look at, if I'm happy with the female side of things and I've picked out my culls and my beef matings, I can go on to the top right hand corner here and press the new blue box up the top for next, and that'll bring me along to the bull selection side of things. Okay, so the first thing I suppose we need to look at is, are we going to use bulls just from the active bull list? So these are bulls maybe that have history, or they have calves on the ground, I suppose, with accurate calving records. But we also have the option to choose from all AI bulls out there, which is going to give us the option of a lot of younger bulls and possibly a lot more higher genetic bulls. So I'm just going to pick that selection for the purpose of tonight, to pick our team of bulls. And also a new feature literally only added today for the first time is this beef bulls tab. So we also have the option, if we want to pick those AI sires for the dairy herd, we can click on beef bulls here, and we can select bulls based on the DBI index, which Michael will be going into maybe more in later on in the night. Pick bulls that are easy calving and low gestation for the dairy herd. So we have that option there. We're just going to focus on the dairy side of things for the purpose of tonight. Okay, so you'll notice along the left-hand side of the screen here, I have a lot of options in the blue boxes here. And if I click on any of those, there's more selection criteria comes up here. So the first one I'm going to look at is breed. So depending on your breeding goals, there might be some breeds which you maybe don't want to choose from. So for the purpose of tonight there, I'm just going to unselect all the other breeds, and I'm just left with Friesians and Holsteins, okay, for the purpose of demonstration. We also have an option, if I scroll down further, some people will prefer to use one AI station over another, and you have the option to deselect out based on whichever AI company you use, or leave them all open, which is what I'm going to do for tonight as well. Again, another new feature literally only added today, hot off the press, is the option to select bulls based on sex semen or conventional. So conventional being the normal AI straws that we're all used to dealing with. But if I want to just pick bulls that have sex semen available, I can deselect conventional, and I'm left with the bulls that are available in sex semen. But important probably to check out with your technician as regards the availability of those also. But George will talk a little bit more about sex semen later on. So look at, I suppose, just to get into the actual selection side of things, in terms of EBI, so Michael talked about a target of no less than 200, but I'm just going to try push that a bit harder. I'm going to set that minimum of 250, still a very reasonable target. There's still plenty of bulls. So out of a total of 1,160 bulls that we had originally, we're still left with 250 bulls across all AI stations. So then again, I'm clicking between options here on the left-hand side in the blue boxes. And my next option is to click on Ebi Sub Indexes here. So again, Michael talked about targets for milk and fertility sub indexes. I'm just going to push those a little bit harder and see what availability there is for bulls if we push those figures a little harder. So I'm going to select 90 for milk and just see what happens. I'm going to go push a bit harder on the fertility side of things as well, maybe 110. Just important to note, so I'm sliding what we call the sliders here on the screen. So I'm pulling this bar from left to right to bring up my criteria and select no animals less than whatever I set the bar to. Also worth noting is these brackets and figures, or these figures and brackets, you might be wondering what they are. They're the individual herds. So when you log in on your own account, they're your own individual herds EBI averages figures. So if we want to get genetic gain, we're going to be picking bulls with a higher figure than our own EBI average. So look at, again, in terms of calving, I'm just going to pull the slider from left to right. In terms of maintenance, so Michael talked about cow size. If we pull this slider here from left to right, we're ruling out a lot of the larger framed animals, which have a higher demand or cost for maintenance to maintain themselves. And if we pull from the right to left, we're going to rule out a lot of the smaller animals. So I'm just going to leave that from 0 onwards, which Michael said is a 640 kilo live weight animal. So then obviously the other key criteria we're going to look at is health. So we really want to be picking bulls with a positive health sub-index figure. I always say, it's all well and good to breed the best genetics that are out there, but if it's an animal that's going to have a cell count or a lameness issue down the tracks, that's an animal that'll slip out of the herd and we won't get to cash in on the genetics that are there. So very important that we don't select bulls with negative traits for health. So you could push that figure further, but I'm just going to leave it at 0 for demonstration. So we can get into even more nitty gritty. We've gone through the EBI sub indexes. We've set our criteria. Now we can have a look at the milk production figures also. So milk kgs, this is basically the milk volume figure. So we want to rule out potentially maybe some of the very lower volume bulls. So I'm going to set that it's nothing less than minus 200 for volume. But we also want to rule out some of the very higher volume with potentially lower solids animals as well. So we want to drive milk solids production from our percentages more so than from litres alone. We'll obviously need a certain amount of litres to carry the percentages also, or the solids also. So look at in terms of fat kgs then as well, I'm pulling from left to right. And I'm going to try get figures well above what my own herd average is shown in the brackets above. So as I'm scrolling along, the number of bulls I'm left with as I go, as I tighten up the criteria to be selected is shortening all the time. So we're still left with 57 bulls out of 1,160 to start with. So I'm really going to drive my fat and protein percentages now. As I said, that's where we want the solids to come from. It's from the percentages. More so than litres driven. So look at, as I push this, I'm going to be left with less and less bulls. But even with the selection criteria I've set there, so well above what we have in our own herd, we're still left with 27 bulls out of a total of 1,100. So look at another little tip. So I can pull from left to right. This will only really work on your laptop. It's not really a job for the phone, a laptop or computer desktop. I'm pulling from left to right with my mouse, and I can also, using my arrow keys on the keyboard, I can make smaller incremental changes by just tapping the arrow keys on my keyboard, because sometimes it can be hard to get to the desired figure using the mouse alone. So look at, I still have 19 bulls available. So look, I'd be more than happy with the criteria we've picked there to use from any of those bulls. So just for presentation purposes, I'm just going to randomly select a few of them. So over on the right hand side of the screen here, we have the option to select a bull in the blue box. So now we're given the option to select for cows or heifers. So I'm going to click the cow box and save selection. Then I'm going to go back to my list again and again, just at random and just for demonstration, I'm just going to pick again for the cows and the heifers. I'll talk about a little bit later. So I'll just pick 4 bulls. We'll just say, so as I say, in a real scenario, you'll be picking 8, if not more than up to 10, I suppose, for a herd of this size. So look, I just have 4 bulls selected out at this stage. As I pick more bulls, my bull team reliability, is shown in this box here, will go up. So currently I haven't enough bulls, really. I've only 85% team reliability. Really, we want to get that figure up closer to 100%, 90 to 95% bull team reliability ideally. And if I was to add in more bulls there, that figure would continue to increase. I also have the option to view the bulls that I've already currently added in. So there, the list of the 4 bulls that I've currently added in. And we also have a bull team average. So the average EBI for the 4 bulls that I've currently added in. So as I say, if you're doing it in reality, you'll add in a few more. So the other thing we can do here in terms of heifers, we usually like to have, very important that we get low calving difficulty animals for the heifers, and everyone will measure that to themselves and have maybe slightly different criteria. But we can pull down our heifer calving difficulty figure here when we go into calving. On the drop down over here, we can move our heifer calving difficulty, and we also like to sometimes have some records to back that up for some people, and we can pull up the figure here in terms of the number of records that an individual bull has. So for tonight, I'm not going to go into the selection of it, just because I don't have time. We could spend all night really going through this program. There's so much in it, but you can run it quite quick and easy with the criteria we've already set. So again, I'm just clicking the top right hand blue box up the top there to move it on when I'm happy with the selections I've made. So at the moment here, I have the option to manually enter in bulls. So again, if there's a bull from the catalog, perhaps that we haven't found in our search that we wanted to use, or for some reason, so in this scenario, I haven't picked any bulls for heifers. So I have a few bulls there that I know would be safe for heifers. So I'm just gonna manually enter those in by putting in their code up the top and selecting for heifers here in the bottom line there. And again, I'm saving selection as I go along. I also have the option now with the new program, I have the option to add in beef bulls if I want to do so here also. So again, I could just add in a couple of beef bulls just to show for demonstration purposes. And those are ones that I can put against the cows that I've already selected for beef mating. So again, we're just saving as we go. Okay, so we have the bulls that we've manually entered now are coming up here. And again, up the top, I'm clicking the next button in the top right-hand corner to progress. So look at now we have an option to look at straw allocation. I suppose we would be recommending that people don't play around with these figures too much. I suppose the whole purpose of picking a team of bulls is that we pick a team to reduce the risk of individual bulls falling, or so we want to use bulls evenly within that team. So if we pick 8 bulls in our team, we want to use those 8 bulls evenly. So we don't want to have a high proportion of straws used for one bull within the team. We want to use them evenly. So I'd recommend not playing around with that figure there. Again, we can go on next. So it's just looking at the heifers, and the bulls we've picked for the heifers are coming up here again, hoping to use even usage. So again, I'm just going to click the top right and click the next button. And they're the dairy beef bulls that we've added in. So that's a new feature, literally only added in today to the program. So they're showing up there as well. So look, I'm going to keep pressing next in the top right corner. What's happening now is the sire advice is running in the background. It's allocating the bulls that we've selected, and it's allocating them to suitable cows. So it's running an inbreeding check in the background as the codes have got more similar as we've gone on in time. It's been harder and harder to track ancestry and prevent inbreeding. So what the program is doing is it's running an inbreeding check on all the cows and the bulls and preventing us from using a bull on a cow that's too highly related with it. It's also matching the most suitable animals. So if we have a high fertility bull, it'll match that to some of our lower fertility cows in order to breed a more balanced animal going forward. So there's a lot going on in the background there. And you'll see the selections are coming up here. But if I click accept here in the top right corner again, I suppose this is one of the beauties of doing this exercise is if we're happy with the results we have the option to send those selective matings to the AI technician's handheld. So when the technician comes into the yard, he punches in the cow number of the tag number of the individual cow, and he automatically has a bull selected there to mate with that cow. And he actually has 3 options, as I'll show you here. So I'm not going to send it to the AI handheld for tonight, what we've looked at, but I'm going to click View PDF, and it's going to bring up a summary of what we've just done. Okay, so this is the page that we're going to get in our summary. So on the top line here, we have our own herd EBI figures here and the sub indexes. What we have on the third line is the weighted average of the bull team that we've used. So they're the bulls that we've selected, and we have an average of those bulls. And what it's doing then is making a prediction. If we mate these bulls with these animal females in our herd, this is what the 2023 calf crop would hopefully look like. So you'll see we've selected bulls with high percentages, high kilos of fat and protein, high EBIs, high fertility, good health sub-indexes, and that's going to feed through into the calf crop for 2023. Underneath then, we just have a list of the bulls that we've used. So this is like your shopping list for the AI technician. If you're talking to him to check availability for the different bulls. And then if we go down further, we have an option to look at what are the individual selections for each cow. So as I mentioned earlier, at the very start, we marked out a few cows for culling. So they're allocated no bulls in the system. The animals allocated a dairy for dairy breeding. We have 3 options so for some reason, if bull 1 isn't available on the day, we have the option to go to bull 2 and even bull 3 in certain scenarios. If we know then that those bulls are not going to cause inbreeding above a level of what is acceptable. In terms of the beef matings then, so we selected out a couple of cows that we were going to give beef AI to, and they're giving us a beef AI bull to mate to those as well. So a great summary, to be able to print off and use in terms of even if you're doing your own AI there, you have a great printout there of what you need to use in terms of what cow is getting what bull. So look, at just to wrap it up, as I say, it's a big program. There's a lot in it, but a few simple steps you can do go a long part of the way. And just to summarize it, I suppose, when we're picking a team of bulls, we're talking about a minimum of 7 to 8 bulls. And for larger herds, you're going to want to use more bulls in your team. You're going to use each bull evenly within that team. We're not talking about picking 8 bulls and using 50% of the straws from one bull. We want to use them all evenly to spread the risk. We can be selective on the cows to breed replacements from, I suppose, as we've moved from an expansion phase into a more consolidating the herd phase. And that's going to maximize genetic gain if we're able to be selective on the cow side as well as the bull side of things. And obviously, look, what Michael has shown you, the EBI is going for 20 years now plus at this stage, since 2001. There's a fabulous information in there. We know it works from what we're seeing on the ground, and we want to pick bulls with a high EBI value. In terms of the sire advice then, look, you're really maximizing your genetic gain. If we were to pick one thing to do in the year and to really give a bit of time to, this is the most important decision you'll make in the year for your farm going forward. The decisions we make today will be yielding benefits for the next 5, 6, 7 years, and it's cumulative. We're adding on top of that all the time. it's really worth giving the time to. If we make a wrong decision today, we'll be regretting it, and our herd performance will suffer in the long term. So you really couldn't emphasize that point enough, that this is one of the most important exercises you'll do during the year, and the sire advice program is allowing us to really maximize that genetic gain. It's a very efficient way of doing it. You'll see there in a couple of minutes we've picked a team of bulls. We don't have to go running through a load of catalogs. We can send it to the AI technicians handheld. That's another job done. And it can also be printed onto breeding charts that we can hang up on the wall as well. So it really is an efficient way of picking a team of bulls in a quick and accurate manner. We've prevented inbreeding because that's running in the background, which is important as well. And as well, we're balanced breeding. So the program is picking, as I said, if you have a low fertility cow, we're picking a high fertility bull for that cow, and we're hoping to breed a balanced cow into the future. So look, at that's, as I say, I'd be more than happy to take questions, and if anyone wanted help with the running the program, you know, I'd encourage them to contact the office or contact their advisor if they need a hand. So I'd be happy to take questions then if anyone has them.
And Nigel, there's just one question there coming in there. Just to explain again the difference between the all bull list and the active bull list.
Yeah. So basically, Michael, the active bull list, I suppose, would have bulls which have a number of calves on the ground. They have a number of progeny, whereas the all AI bull list would include younger bulls which may not have the same number of calves, or mightn't even have any calves on the ground. But we'd still be happy to use those all AI bulls list for picking bulls for mature cows, and it gives us a wider scope in terms of the EBIs we're able to pick from.
Okay, and there's I suppose a similar vein there. Just a question coming there on the distinction between genomic bulls and proven bulls. Some people will be a bit nervous maybe of genomic bulls and proven bulls. Any opinion there, Nigel?
Yeah, look, I suppose genomics is around a good while now, since 2009. And by picking a team of bulls, we're generally spreading the risk. There is potential for bulls to rise and fall. That's the nature of genetics. The genomics has given us a good, accurate picture in terms of the potential of that animal. By picking a team of bulls, we're able to spread the risk, and using them evenly, we're protecting ourselves from individual bulls rising or falling. So I'd be more than happy to use genomic bulls. Michael, look, at if there's daughter proven bulls that are meeting the criteria as well, there'd be nothing wrong with using them, and maybe on the heifers if you want more accurate calving information. But genomics is working. You'll see it over time if you compare. If you look back and compare bulls that were genomic at a point versus the daughter proven, and you look at the progeny 5 years down the line, the genomic bulls are generally holding higher than the daughter proven.
Okay, so I suppose it depends a little bit on your level of maybe just risk or something like that. Some people would say very safe with proven bulls, but you're going to limit your ability to move forward as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Nigel, yeah, thanks for that. There'll probably be further questions for you later. I'm going to bring in George there now, please.
Sorry,
okay, George, thanks.
Yeah, hi Mike, how are you?
Okay, good to have you.
No, hold on there for a second. Something not showing here. Okay. Nope. Close. Sorry, lads. Just 1 second out. I'll get this up for you. At all. No,
I know this is hot off the press with you, yeah. So yeah.
I know. I'm just flicking around there now. Sorry about that. Now here we go. So basically, what you asked me to cover here tonight, Mike, was a little bit about heifer target weights, synchronization protocols, and the use of sex semen. I'm going to do it in a slightly different order. We'll start with the heifer with target weights, then we'll move on a little bit about the sex semen, and thirdly we'll talk about synchronization protocols for use with sex semen in particular. So we start off first of all about heifers. Suppose the whole thing about the heifer at breeding time and success is underpinned around repo with the type of weights that we're achieving in the replacement heifer at breeding time. So typically in the Kilkenny region, herds will be running with a maintenance subindex of somewhere between 0 and 20 in most herds. And what this means is knowing your maintenance subindex is a prerequisite for establishing the appropriate live weight of the heifers around breeding time. So if we look here in the grey column and we look at 0 and 20 as being typical, 0 is a kind of a target 1st of April weight for our replacement heifers. So a heifer with a maintenance subindex of €20, and you'll find the maintenance subindex on the EBI report. So with a maintenance subindex of around 20, we'd expect that the mature live weight of those cows is around 540 kgs. That's a cow in her 3rd lactation at 150 days in milk. So for a spring calving herd, that's somewhere in the June-July period. Now we know that based on that our pre-breeding weight is around 60, our target pre-breeding weight is around 60% of that weight. So that's about 326 kilos, assuming a pre-breeding date of around the 1st of May. And so if we go back and assume roughly 30 kilos of gain between the 1st of April and the 1st of May, that means that our heifer with a maintenance subindex of 20 should weigh just shy of 300 kilos on the 1st of April. A heifer with a maintenance subindex of around 0 is a bigger animal, and we'd expect her to have a 1st of April weight of around 355 kilos to achieve a pre-breeding weight on the 1st of May of around 385 and a mature live weight of around 640 kgs. And for heifers with a maintenance subindex of -20, they're much larger animals that need to be around 400 kilos now and around 440 at breeding. But as I said, in Kilkenny, most herds will be in the order of 0 to 20 maintenance subindex. So we're talking about 1st of April target weights of around 300 to 350 kilos and pre-breeding weights around the 1st of May of 326 to 385 kgs. At Oak Park, we rear around 120 heifers every year for the research stations in Moore Park. And a few years ago, we weighed the heifers around the 1st of March and had a maintenance subindex in our heifers at that stage of around €20. Now, on average, we were pleased. Compared to a target weight of them around the 1st of March of 270 kgs, they were averaging 280 kgs. But it's important to note that there were about 20 of those heifers, in around 100 heifers being weighed at that time, 20 of them were actually below the target weight of 272 kg. So even though on average they were above it, there were some heifers here that were below target. So you can see the range in weights at that stage was from around 250 kgs to around 360 kgs. So some of them were well above target and more that were under. And I suppose it's a reminder that the important thing isn't the average weight, but it's the actual individual animal's weight that's important. And it's important to have all animals at or around the threshold pre-breeding target weight as close to breeding as possible. And I suppose in terms of management of the lighter heifers, I suppose the first priority is to get heifers to grass as soon as you can. And with weather like we're having at the moment, it's possible to achieve a kilo plus of average daily gain per day from now on when heifers are turned out to grass from now on. If grass is scarce, feeding a couple of kilos of meal per head per day for the few weeks before breeding will help to make up the difference in deficiency that's there in terms of grass and ensure live weight gains of close to a kilo where possible. Where heifers are maintained indoors, a high quality silage with about 2 kgs of meal will be needed to ensure that they achieve the kind of gain that we're looking for if they're below target. And by below target, I'd be saying, roughly heifers that are approximately 20 kilos or so below the kind of target weights that we're looking for. If you go on and move on for a minute now, Michael, we just talk for a second about sex semen and some of the issues around it. I suppose one of the most important slides I've seen in terms of sex semen has to do with the timing of AI and when behavior occurs. And I suppose just to bring us back a little bit in terms of the basics around fertility and heat, the estrous cycle in the cow. We know that the estrous cycle in cows and heifers lasts for around a 21-day cycle, but it can vary from 18 to 24. But more specifically, from the start of standing heat, ovulation will occur at around 30 hours after cows start on standing heat. So, for example, if a cow starts to stand or a heifer starts to stand this morning at 8 a.m., she won't actually ovulate until tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. So there's a long interval between when standing heat begins and when ovulation or release of the egg from the ovary occurs. But once the egg is released from the ovary, the egg remains viable and can be fertilized for a short enough window of between 8 and 10 hours. Now, conventional semen, when we use ordinary semen, it's actually a very forgiving technology and has a long period during which it remains viable and is capable of fertilizing the egg. So it's not as important. The timing of insemination with conventional semen can occur while the heifer is still standing in heat, and the semen will remain viable for a long period of time and is capable of fertilizing the heifer. With sex semen, there are two things going on. The first thing we need to remember is that we're typically now talking about the 4M product, or it's a 4 million sex sorted sperm per straw. So the number of sperm per straw is much reduced compared to conventional semen. And the second part, I think that must be remembered about sex semen, is capacitation has already occurred. So it'll be, first of all, it won't remain viable for as long. And so in an ideal world, we delay the timing of insemination until later after the start of standing heat, and to ensure that it's available closer to the time of ovulation compared to conventional semen, to ensure optimal conception rates. Research at Moore Park over a number of years at this stage would show that compared to typical conception rates, the conception rate using sex semen is about 85% as good as conventional semen. So if you're aiming for 70% conception rates with maiden heifers using conventional semen, you're likely to get a conception rate of closer to 60% with sex semen in that scenario, and still be considered to have achieved a good result. So if we look at using then the sex semen 14 to 20 hours after heat onset, many of these heifers will already, in fact, all of these heifers will have finished their standing heat at that stage. So if heat onset occurs between 1 and 7 in the evening, the optimal time for AI using sex semen is the following morning at 9 a.m. If the heifer starts to begins her standing heat between 4 in the afternoon and 10 at night, there's a delay in when AI occurs. The optimal time is around 12 midday, and so on and so forth. So you can see that the optimal time for AI using sex semen is quite variable and depends on the onset of standing heat. So frequent observation is essential where we're planning to use sex semen with maiden heifers. Ideally, and Stephen Moore would suggest, Steve Moore is a researcher at Moore Park, he suggests you need to be heat detecting very frequently during the day for a period of around 20 minutes. Or alternatively, you need to use something like a collar or tag to determine when the actual onset of standing heat is occurring. And he says that for optimal fertility, you need to use a couple of inseminate a couple of different times during the day to get optimal fertility as a result. Whereas with cows or heifers in heat, they can be bred with conventional semen or unsexed semen and achieve optimal conception rates because of that timing issue, and the period of viability is so much longer with conventional semen. So to avoid this sort of multiple AI times, because in many farms there'll only be one time for AIing the heifers during the day, there are a couple of options available to you. The one I've seen used most is where the heifers are being AI'd once a day. So typically on such farms, we'll recommend the use of sex semen for heifers that came on bulling in the evening before and have gone off standing heat in the morning. And for the heifers that came on in the overnight and during the morning and are still in standing heat around the time of insemination, say around 11 o'clock, for example, in the morning, they'd get conventional semen. So in that scenario, you'd breed maybe a third to half of your heifers to sex semen, and you'd breed the other half of the heifers that are being AI'd will be bred to conventional semen. And I've seen that work well on farms and achieve conception rates that are very, very similar using sex and conventional semen in those situations, with only once a day AI being used. Now, using a conventional program of synchronization, and it's my preferred synchronization program at Heifers, well, prostaglandin is the product of choice in this scenario. And the one thing you need to know about prostaglandin is Heifers must be cycling before you use it, or use a prostaglandin just simply won't work. So typically what we talk about is starting to breed and inseminate on typically a Monday, and the following Monday, give a shot of prostaglandin to heifers that haven't been seen breeding. And 11 days later, which would be the following Friday, give a shot of prostaglandin to the few heifers that will remain unbred. So typically in this scenario, a third of heifers will receive no prostaglandin, and they'll have been bred to the observed heat without any use of prostaglandin. 2/3 of heifers will get a shot of prostaglandin, such as estromate, lutalizer, or enzaprost. And less than 1/10 of heifers will get a second shot of PG. At Oak Park, in a typical year breeding season with around 120 heifers bred, we'll use prostaglandin on 80 heifers, and we'll have 5 heifers or so that will get a second prostaglandin shot after 11 days. And practically all heifers will be bred over a 10 or 11 day period. And when the heifers get the shot of prostaglandin, they'll typically come in after 48 and 72 hours, and they'll be inseminated the following morning and the day after. So around day 10 and day 11 is when they'll typically be bred in that situation. And we've achieved very high conception rates with this system and find it most satisfactory with conventional semen. The second option that Stephen would recommend for herds, and it's particularly for really good control of insemination for use, for example, with sex semen, is the use of a full timed AI protocol. Now, with the heifer, the protocol involves the use of a seeder or a coil for a 6-day period. The timing of coil removal and prostaglandin injections, or 2 prostaglandin injections given 5 days after the coil is introduced, and 6 days after the coil is introduced. And at the second injection, the coil is removed. And exactly 48 hours later, he recommends that the heifer receives the second injection of something like ovalarin or Receptil. Typically, Receptil is the one I know I'm most familiar with. Some of his more recent research would suggest that the optimal time to inseminate with sex semen is 8 hours later. So typically, the second prostaglandin injection and coil removal takes place at 9 in the morning, and the sex semen is inseminated at 3 in the afternoon. So there's 4 interventions, 4 injections, 1 coil, and there's a lot of cost involved in this procedure, but it gives excellent control and takes away all of the issues around timing of insemination and getting inseminators back a couple of times a day to inseminate heifers. So I suppose if there are 3 take-home messages, the first one would be to aim to have your heifers at 60% of their target pre-calving live weight at the start of the breeding season. And your pre-calving live weight is determined by their maintenance subindex. So know what the maintenance subindex is, focus on the lighter heifers and get them up to target weight along with the heavier ones. Sex semen will achieve typically an 80 to 85% success rate compared to conventional semen. So for where we expect to achieve 70% conception rate with maiden heifers using conventional semen, we could expect to achieve 60% conception rate to maiden heifers with sex semen. And the use of fixed time AI gives more control of the timing of ovulation and when insemination should take place. But it is a costly procedure, costing roughly an additional 30 to 40 euro per heifer treated on that program. So it can be a costly enough procedure. Okay, sorry about the sharing issue there at the start. I'll take any questions that people have now at this stage, Michael.
Or can you just comment in general on the kind of probably what we expect to see an increased role and usage of sex semen both in cows and in heifers, and the sort of work that's been going on in Moore Park there, the change that's taken place there in the last 12 months or so. Yeah.
So I suppose one of the things that's happened, Michael, has been the lab has been established back in Moore Park to sex sort semen. So there are 3 machines, I think they're worth about $1.5 million each, and they'll sort 70 or 80,000 doses of semen for the coming breeding season. So in terms of the quality of the semen, it's all the 4M procedure, which has been found to work really well. And it's also the use of bulls that are very high EBI. So Nigel is talking about using high EBI bulls. There's no issue with the quality of the EBI to bulls that's available through sex semen this year. So it's all very positive developments in anticipation of greater use of sex semen. And I suppose where it fits in is it's not necessarily to breed more heifers than you normally want, but it's to breed less of the calves that we don't want to breed anymore, which is less of the Frisian bulls, dairy bull calves, and allow more opportunity to use maybe better beef bulls on some of the other cows within the herd.
Okay, so that clears it. Okay, so just want to just move on finally, just the last, just a brief section there on maybe George, I'll get you to comment on this too, on the dairy, our dairy beef index. Yeah, okay, we have it there. Can that be seen? Yeah, George, do you want to just comment on that, please?
Yeah, so I suppose how the dairy beef index works is and Nigel alluded to it as well. It's ranking bulls according to their suitability for the dairy herd, and it's effectively 2 halves to it. One is the value of the beef calf that's born, and the second part that's of relevance to the beef farmer, and the second part is the value of the calving sub-index, and that will look at things like direct calving difficulty and gestation length. They're the 2 big ones. So I suppose there are opportunities. I suppose when I talk to the AI companies, one of the things that they emphasize to me is that there are significant opportunities to use higher DBI bulls with good beef sub-indices on some of the cows within the herd. There are cows that won't be suitable for breeding to bulls with a slightly harder calving difficulty. But there are cows within the herd that can be bred to breed very valuable beef calves for the beef side of the house that are available using DBI, and you can select for these within the index that's available to us now. So it's well worth looking at it, choosing a couple of bulls. Nigel showed the use of a couple of beef bulls using the SIRE advice program, which is a welcome development. I suppose, Nigel, one of the things that's important to mention when you use the DBI and select for beef bulls in the SIRE advice, the program is also automatically selecting the cows that are genetically easier calving for the bulls that are within the range that are slightly more difficult calving. And similarly, it'll be selecting the bulls that are genetically easier calving for cows that have a slightly greater direct calving difficulty figure themselves. So it's doing all that in the background, and using it through the SIRE advice is a huge opportunity for dairy farmers to increase the value of the calf crop that they're going to produce over the next number of years.
Okay, so that's an indication of where we're going to see a trend there with in terms of the increased use of sex semen to eliminate some of the low quality beef calves, and the use of the dairy beef index to get higher quality beef calves in the future as we settle down a bit in terms of herd expansion and so on.
We'll see a rapid uptake of this over the next number of years, Michael. I have no doubt about that.
Okay, there's a question. Just moving on there, George. There's a question coming in there from a Waterford source there, just inquiring about the opinion on the use of fixed time AI on cows.
So yeah, one of the things I was talking to Stephen about today, Michael, is the protocol there, and I have it in the presentation, but I didn't present it. For cows is slightly different to the protocol for replacement heifers. So it's actually a 10-day program. One of the questions I asked Stephen in relation to fixed time AI and use on either heifers or cows is, and it's something I've been suspicious of myself, that does it give the same results, fixed time AI, compared to a more natural estrus or one using prostaglandin? And the honest answer to that question is no, it doesn't. So it will typically have a slightly lower conception rate in cows and in heifers compared to a more natural heat, or maybe even a prostaglandin type protocol on the heifers. So Would I recommend it? Well, there's two things about it. Number one, it can be quite expensive. It gives excellent control, but it is more expensive. Number two, it's giving slightly conception rates, and I'd use it in very particular circumstances on cows. I'd probably use it for late calving or on estrus cows to bring them in estrus, and otherwise I probably wouldn't be recommending its use and kind of as a blanket procedure, Michael, to be perfectly honest about it.
Okay, well, I get the drift there, what you're saying, Jordan. I mean, if we have a few at the tail end that you want to try and tidy up, and that's where the role of that comes in at you.
It's really good for that, but not necessarily for blanket treatment across the herd.
Okay. There's another comment just coming on, just a comment on this, George. What do you think the land be cap on production at that peak milk time for the next few years? How will that affect breeding decisions? Have you any opinion on that?
Yeah, so in under normal circumstances, and it'll have little enough effect in terms of peak milk. If we have a compactly calved herd, the effect of the peak milk, we did some analysis on this last year. You might haven't looked at it recently, but our analysis showed that in most situations, using a compact calving type situation had little enough effect on the average lambia supplier. Individuals will have issues with it, but it depended on where they were already in terms of their the history that they had. For most people, compact calving has a minimal impact on peak milk that they're producing, Michael.
You're just saying essentially, George, that for the next few years, given that we're going to have the lambia restrictions, people should sort of just continue with their normal genetic progress or the plans that they have for breeding and don't deviate from those.
Well, the core principles behind it are to do with maximizing grass use across the grazing season, so to produce as much milk as we can off grass. That's number one. And number two then is, I mean, so I'd say for most people, it's all about a one-on-one to look at the individual and see what's going on. But for most people, Michael, I wouldn't deviate from compact early calving in terms of its impact on the peak milk supply. It shouldn't make that much of a difference in most scenarios.
Okay. Now I just see there's a query coming in here, George. Just asking, could you the PG synchronization program, could you just go through it again briefly and just the conception rates associated with it? Maybe do you want to put it on the screen again
for a minute, please, Mike?
Yeah, okay. So I'll let you up there, yeah.
Mike.
Back to your heifer synchronization program.
Back into it here now, Mike. I hope I'm going to the right one here now. Hang on for a second. Just share that one. We'll just flick up through it again. No, where are we at all? Okay. Okay, so we start with this one here. So this is by far and away the easiest and, in my opinion, the most successful synchronization program with heifers. So we'll take, and this is not a fixed time program. So day 0, or we call it a Monday. You start on a Monday, you breed your heifers to observed heat as normal, and the following Monday, you inject heifers that haven't been seen breeding. You inject heifers that haven't been bred. By Wednesday or Thursday, most of your heifers will have come in. A small number may not necessarily breed to that heat, and they will get an injection on the following Friday week. So we were starting on a Monday. The following Monday, we give a shot of prostaglandin to heifers that were not bred or not AI'd. And the following Friday week, the few heifers that remain will get a second shot of prostaglandin. It should be a minimal number. And that's by far and away, to me, the optimal synchronization program for heifers, typically for use with conventional semen, is where it really has its impact. And there'll be zero difference in this program with conception rate, all other things being equal.
So conception rate of 70%, George?
So what you'll find with this program is conception rates will typically average between 70 and 75%. We've used this program on the heifers at Oak Park for many years, and we're typically seeing conception rates with conventional semen of between 70 and 75%, no issue at all.
George, am I right in saying that where you said there that you can give them the shot of progesterone there at 7 days, that can be extended? That could go to 8, 9, 10, 11 days if you and lessen maybe the pressure on use of bulls for mopping up thereafter if bulls are being used to mop up.
To get the maximum value out of Michael, yes, you can delay the use of the shot of prostaglandin, but to get maximum value out of it and to give you the minimal number of days of heat detection, etc., it's best done a week after you start. I recommend this. This is just the protocol we follow, and it works really, really well. The second protocol is a really controlled AI protocol where you're using a PRID or a coil. It involves insertion of a PRID 8 days before breeding, and you leave the PRID in for 6 days. When you insert the PRID, you give the heifer a shot of typically Receptil at the time you put the coil or PRID in. Now, 5 days later, you give the heifer a shot of prostaglandin, and this will knock the corpus luteum off 80 to 85%, maybe 90% of the heifers. A small number of corpus lutea remain. So the new change here is a second shot of prostaglandin is given at the time that the cedar or PRID is being removed. 48 hours later, the heifer gets a second shot of Receptil. And if you're using conventional semen, at that time, you will inseminate her at the same time. If you are using sex semen, some of the latest research would suggest that you delay the insemination for a further 8 hours. So typically, coil removal will be at 9 a.m. and with sex semen, 2 days later at 3 p.m., you'd use the sex semen, whereas with the conventional semen, you'd use it at 9 a.m. 2 days later. So conventional semen goes in after 48 hours, along with a shot of Receptil. With sex semen use, delay the insemination for a further 8 hours until around 3 in the afternoon to get optimal success with those heifers. Now, we would expect that if we're achieving a conception rate of 70% using conventional AI, we would hope to achieve a conception rate of around 58 to 60% with a sex semen. And if we're using it in a controlled timed AI situation like this, success would probably be in the order of 55 to 56%, something like that. Okay, Mike, you'll have these protocols available. It's on the recording, and I can send the slides with the recipes to you for distribution to your clients if you want it afterwards.
Okay. No, just moving away slightly there, George, from that area. There's a comment in here, just a question on use of New Zealand bulls that are, why are they rated so low in terms of their fertility sub-index when there's calving results coming in from the AI companies? Do you have an opinion on that one?
With New Zealand bulls?
Yeah.
I suppose they look at what's happening in New Zealand is a totally different environment, and it's a different evaluation system to the way we're evaluating the fertility of our bulls in Ireland. So typically in New Zealand, and in the New Zealand environment, the fertility is evaluated on a 6-week calving rate. In Ireland, how we're evaluating it is in terms of calving interval and survival rate. So it's a slightly different metric for measuring the sub-index. So one doesn't necessarily translate into a similar figure to the other. So there is variation going on. Having said that, Michael, there's probably a change. There will be a change coming in the autumn to reevaluate the fertility sub-index using maybe some different metrics. And one of them may well be the use of the 6-week calving rate in the years ahead. And that's likely to be introduced in the autumn after the breeding season is over. But I suppose we can't walk away from the fertility sub-index that we developed in Ireland, and it's paying fairly substantial dividends and has paid fairly substantial dividends in terms of correcting the decline that we've seen in fertility. So from an Ireland perspective, what we've developed and used for the last 2 decades has served us extremely well.
Okay.
And change is afoot.
Okay, we're coming close to the finish now. Just want to go back to the what I had here myself. Okay, just started a few concluding points that I sort of had just come up here with myself. That might potentially take home messages just from our meeting tonight. And any further questions there, because I see another comment coming in here. I'll come back to in a second. I suppose the whole emphasis on reducing labour and associated with the synchronization of heifers, which George has gone through quite in detail, and just a selection there of easy calving sires for heifers, which has go up through the sire advice system. The prevention of inbreeding, you know, the guarantees that you have with sire advice, so that any nervousness that you might have associated with that is taken away by using the sire advice program, and the access that you have to the top sires and the benefits of improved genetics. Hopefully from this evening we've shown how EBI has delivered over the last number of years, and the benefits that are to be got from going with genomic sires. We know that we have proven sires there in the background, but if you want to make the most progress going forward, the use of genomic sires is the way to go. And the ability of sire advice to try to match traits within herds, to balance out, get an overall balanced breeding within your herds. We've talked about the increased importance of sex semen in the future, and the ability that it has to reduce the number of low value bull calves in the system, and the use of the dairy beef index to improve beef calf quality. So there's some of the messages that we want to give you going home this evening. I think I just see another comment in here. No, I think we're okay there. Unless there's any more questions, I think we've kind of gone through. Just gone over the hour, which is maybe just as much as we wanted to go. Does anybody here want to send off, George? Anything else that you want to say? Maybe just in parting. I know you were in Moorpark today, and you're kind of getting the feel for the latest improvements in breeding there. Any other messages there?
I'm trying to think what else did we cover today. So from a breeding perspective, I suppose what I think the message I'd leave the audience with is, where you're using sex semen, like, use it not to necessarily increase the number of heifer calves that you are having on your farm, but use it instead to reduce the number of maybe poorer quality or maybe lower value beef calves that you're using. But use it with caution. I'd say to people who are thinking of using it here tonight, don't go all out for it in year one. Dip your toe in the water. Use the most fertile cows and the best quality heifers that you have, to try a few of them and see how it works. And use it early in the season, not for too long. Try a few, see is it working for you, and maybe take it to a greater extent than the following year.
Okay. Now, just I see a comment, Richard O'Brien there is just saying to me, Richard, as our AMU manager, just I think a general message you want to get across to people out there is just the use of fertilizer for the next number of weeks. We're all conscious of what's happening in terms of the price and supply and so on, but just the message is that the best value that we can get out of fertilizer is in the coming weeks. We need to use fertilizer to grow grass for cows, and we need to get good crops of silage that can be cut around, we'll say, the 20th or 25th of May, good quality silage coming into next winter. One of the big concerns is that meal prices are probably going to increase further, and there's going to be a risk there of poor quality silage and quantity and quality. You need to get the two things right for next winter. That's your best. That should be part of your plan, and the key to that is to using adequate fertilizer for the next few weeks. So in terms of our first cut silage, typically we're talking about an offtake there of somewhere in the region of about 100 units of nitrogen, 20 units of phosphate, and about 100 units of potash. And that needs to be, so a lot of that, some of that will come from slurry, and some will come from, the rest has to come from chemical fertilizer. So if any individual queries on it, come back to ourselves over the next few weeks, but just make sure and focus on that area. So I think with that, we'll call it an evening, and thanks for everybody for attending this evening, and you know where we are if you want to follow up. So thanks to our speakers there, Nigel and George. Okay, and Mark is there in the background holding the controls. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. All the best.